The house is in my name now. You have until Friday to get out." Those words, spoken by my own son with a smile on his face, still echo in my head at night. I'm Eleanor Patterson, 67 years old, and 2 months ago, my only child tried to make me homeless. I remember staring at Michael across the kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with homework, where we'd celebrated his college acceptance, where I'd comforted him through his first heartbreak. His wife Vanessa stood beside him, her manicured hand resting possessively on his shoulder, wedding ring glinting in the afternoon light. "What are you talking about?" My voice came out surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. Michael slid a folder across the worn oak surface. "It's all legal, Mom. Dad left some loopholes in the will. We found a nice retirement community in Arizona. Small but adequate for someone your age." "Someone my age?" I repeated, my fingers trembling as I opened the folder. Property transfer documents, signatures I didn't recognize, dates from 3 months ago that I had no memory of. "You've been forgetting things lately," Vanessa chimed in, her voice dripping with artificial concern. "Last month you couldn't find your car keys for 3 hours. They were in your purse," I said quietly. "You borrowed them to move your car and never returned them." A flash of something, guilt, annoyance, crossed her face before she recovered. "See? This is exactly what we mean. You're confused, Eleanor. 40 years teaching high school mathematics had taught me to recognize patterns, the accidental misplacing of my belongings, the suggestions that my memory was slipping, the frequent comments about how big this house was for just one person, the casual questions about my finances disguised as concern. I closed the folder and looked up at my son, at the stranger wearing my son's face. "And what if I refuse to leave?" Michael's smile faltered slightly. "Mom, don't make this difficult. The paperwork is filed. The house is mine now." "I see." I stood up slowly, gathering the documents. "And when exactly did I sign over my home to you?" 2 months ago, Vanessa interjected quickly. "Don't you remember? We discussed how maintaining this place was becoming too much for you." I nodded thoughtfully, as if considering their words. "You're right about one thing. This conversation is becoming too much for me. I think you should leave now." "Mom." "Now, Michael." For a moment, I was the authority figure again, the mother who could silence him with a tone. He actually took a step back. "We'll give you until Friday to pack essentials," Vanessa said, her voice hardening. "The movers will come at noon." After they left, I sat alone in my kitchen, in my house, and allowed myself exactly 10 minutes to cry. Then I picked up the phone and made a call I'd prepared for, but hoped I'd never need to make. "Richard, it's Eleanor Patterson. Remember that conversation we had last year about my contingency plan? I need to activate it. Today." Richard Harmon had been my late husband's attorney for 30 years and my trusted friend for longer. He'd also been the one to help me secretly move $800,000 into a blind trust 6 months before my retirement, a decision that had felt paranoid at the time, but now seemed like divine intervention. "They finally made their move?" His voice was grim. "Yes, apparently I signed away my house 2 months ago, while I was at my sister's in Michigan." The silence on the other end spoke volumes. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, he finally said. "Don't touch anything they gave you. And Eleanor, remember what we discussed. Let them think they've won." After hanging up, I walked through my home of 35 years, the home where I'd raised my son, mourned my husband, and planned to live out my days. Family photos lined the hallway, including one from Michael's wedding day 5 years ago. He looked so happy, so much like his father. When had things changed? When had money become more important than his mother's well-being? I stopped at the last photo, taken at my retirement party just 3 months ago. Michael and Vanessa flanking me, all smiles and champagne toasts. "We're so proud of you, Mom," he'd said that night. "Now it's time to enjoy the fruits of your labor." I just hadn't realized they meant to enjoy those fruits without me. Richard arrived bearing legal pads and determination. As we sat planning my countermove, I felt something unexpected beneath my grief and shock, a slow burning anger that clarified my thoughts and straightened my spine. "They come back Friday?" Richard confirmed, making notes. I nodded, thinking of Michael's confident smile. "With movers. Apparently, I have a new home waiting in Arizona." "Well," Richard said, looking up with the faintest hint of satisfaction, "they're going to find something very different waiting for them here." When Friday came, I was ready. I sat on my porch swing, calm and collected, watching as two moving trucks pulled up behind Michael's Mercedes. My son and his wife emerged, faces set with determination, not even glancing at the front porch as they marched up the walkway, focused on their victory, until they saw who was standing beside me. "Hello, Michael," said Judge Martha Winters, my former college roommate and current circuit court judge. "Your mother has quite a story to tell." The blood drained from my son's face as I held up the folder in my hand. "You really should have checked where I was when these documents were supposedly signed. I believe forgery and elder fraud are still crimes in this state, aren't they, Martha?" Michael froze, but Vanessa recovered quickly. "Whatever she's told you is confused ramblings. We have legal documents." "Fraudulent documents," interrupted Richard, stepping forward from the shadows of the porch. "And we have proof." In that moment, as I watched their expressions shift from confidence to fear, I realized something important. I had been preparing for this betrayal long before I consciously suspected it. Perhaps mothers always know their children, even the darkest parts they try to hide. "You really thought I would leave myself vulnerable?" I asked softly. "After 40 years teaching teenagers, you thought I couldn't recognize a poorly planned scheme?" Michael stepped forward, hand outstretched. "Mom, there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I said, rising to my feet. "You have until sunset to get those trucks off my property. After that, we'll continue this conversation with the district attorney present." As they stood frozen on my walkway, I added the words I had rehearsed all night. "And Michael, you really shouldn't have underestimated the woman who taught you how to count." Before he could respond, I went inside and closed the door, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions, and me to face the painful reality that my battle for justice was just beginning. 2 days after I confronted Michael and Vanessa, I received the first threatening call. I was arranging tulips in the kitchen, a small act of normalcy in a world turned upside down, when my phone vibrated against the countertop. "Mom, you need to stop this." Michael's voice was low, controlled, but with an edge I'd never heard before. "You're making a huge mistake. By defending my home from theft?" I kept my voice steady, though my hand tightened around the stem of a yellow tulip until it snapped. "We were trying to help you," he insisted. "The house is too much. You're getting older. What happens when you fall on those stairs?" The concern might have sounded genuine to a stranger, but I recognized the calculated manipulation, the same tone he'd used at 16 when explaining why the car had a dent. "Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night?" I asked quietly. "That stealing my home is for my own good?" "We have witnesses who saw you sign the papers," he said, ignoring my question. "Your friend the judge won't be able to help when we present our evidence." My heart stuttered. "What witnesses?" "Dr. Landon, for one. He's prepared to testify about your cognitive state." Dr. Thomas Landon, my physician for 20 years, or so I thought. I'd only discovered last week that the real Dr. Landon had retired 6 months ago, and the man who'd examined me at my last checkup was his new partner, Dr. Philip Wells, a man who, coincidentally, was Vanessa's second cousin. "Interesting," I said, forcing my voice to remain calm. "And these witnesses saw me sign papers in Boston while I was photographed at my sister's house in Michigan?" A pause. "You're confusing dates again, Mom." "No, Michael. I'm finally seeing things clearly." I hung up before he could respond. The broken tulip lay on the counter, yellow petals already beginning to curl. I swept it into my palm and threw it away, my movements mechanical. Then I called Richard. "They're bringing in fake witnesses," I told him, "including someone posing as my doctor." Richard was silent for a moment. "This goes deeper than we thought. What do we do?" "We pull the trigger on phase 2, he said firmly. "Meet me at First National tomorrow at 9 a.m. Wear something professional, bring the insurance documents." That night I couldn't sleep. I paced the hallways of my home, touching familiar walls, straightening pictures that needed no straightening. In Michael's old bedroom, preserved like a museum to my son's childhood, I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to pinpoint the moment I'd lost him. Was it when he met Vanessa? When James, my husband, died and left us both adrift in grief? Or had the seeds been planted earlier, in the private school tuitions we'd stretched to afford? The emphasis on success and status that had seemed so important at the time? I opened his bedside drawer and found the Mother's Day card he'd made in 2nd grade. "I love you more than all the stars," he'd written in wobbly handwriting. Had that love been conditional all along? Morning came with no answers, just the steely resolve that had carried me through widowhood and now would carry me through this. I dressed carefully in a navy pantsuit I'd worn to board meetings, applied lipstick with a steady hand, and drove myself to First National Bank. Richard was waiting outside, briefcase in hand. "Ready?" I nodded, squaring my shoulders. More than ready. Inside, the bank manager, Paul Whitman, another former student, greeted me with respect but curiosity. "Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Harmon, how can I help you today?" Richard placed his briefcase on the desk. "Mrs. Patterson would like to access her safe deposit box and make some adjustments to her accounts." Paul's eyes flickered between us. "Of course, I'll need identification and your key, Mrs. Patterson." As I handed over my driver's license and the small key I'd kept on a separate ring from my house keys, I noticed a familiar figure at the counter across the lobby. Vanessa's brother Dale, pretending to fill out a deposit slip while watching us. "We're being observed," I murmured to Richard, who nodded imperceptibly. "Let them watch," he whispered back. "It's all part of the plan." In the private room with my safe deposit box, I removed the documents we needed. The original deed to the house, James's unaltered will, and insurance policies Michael knew nothing about. But we also made a show of removing empty envelopes and discussing account numbers loudly enough to be overheard. Back at the manager's desk, Richard laid out our actual purpose. "Mrs. Patterson would like to verify that no one has attempted to access her accounts without authorization." Paul typed rapidly on his keyboard, then frowned. "There was an attempt last week to transfer funds from your main account to a new account using your online banking credentials. Our fraud department flagged it because the request came from an IP address in Phoenix, Arizona." My hands grew cold. "Phoenix?" "Yes, the transfer was denied, but—" He hesitated. "But what, Paul?" I prompted. "There was a second attempt yesterday, with a power of attorney document we hadn't seen before. Our legal department is reviewing it now." Richard and I exchanged glances. They were moving faster than we'd anticipated. "I need to freeze all my accounts immediately," I said, "and I'd like to transfer funds from this account." I slid a slip of paper across the desk to the trust account number listed here. Paul looked at the amount, and his eyebrows rose slightly. "That's nearly everything in your primary savings, Mrs. Patterson." "Yes," I agreed calmly. "And it's still mine to move, isn't it?" "Of course." He began processing the transaction, but his fingers paused over the keyboard. "Mrs. Patterson, forgive me for asking, but are you in some kind of trouble?" I thought of my son, who had once promised to love me more than all the stars, now plotting to strip me of everything I owned. "No, Paul," I said with a sad smile, "but someone else is about to be." As we left the bank, Dale was nowhere to be seen. Undoubtedly, he was already calling Michael and Vanessa, reporting what he thought he'd witnessed. Let them think I was moving money they could still access. Let them believe they were one step behind, instead of 3 steps ahead. "Phase 2 complete," Richard said as we reached my car. "Are you ready for Phase 3? It's going to get uglier before it gets better." I looked back at the bank, thinking of the account that now held my financial future. An account created 6 months ago under a trust name that even Michael, with all his scheming, would never think to look for. "I've been teaching for 40 years, Richard. I know that sometimes the hardest lessons are the most necessary ones." That evening, the doorbell rang at precisely 6:13 p.m. Through the peephole, I saw a courier in uniform shifting impatiently from foot to foot. When I opened the door, he thrust an envelope at me without meeting my eyes. "Eleanor Patterson, legal documents, signature required." As I signed, I noticed the return address, Brennan, Weiss and Associates, the law firm where Vanessa's father had worked before retirement. The pieces were falling into place like a grotesque puzzle. Inside the envelope was a formal notice. I was being sued for mental competency evaluation. The hearing was scheduled for next Tuesday, just 5 days away. They were moving with breathtaking speed, hoping to overwhelm me. According to the filing, my concerned family had documented evidence of significant cognitive decline and financially irresponsible behavior. They cited recent unusual withdrawals and paranoid accusations against family members as evidence. They were requesting emergency temporary guardianship, effective immediately. My hands weren't trembling anymore. Instead, I felt a strange, cold clarity descending. If they succeeded, I would lose control not just of my house, but of every decision in my life, where I lived, how I spent my money, even what medications I took. I called Richard immediately. "They're going for guardianship," I said without preamble. "Emergency hearing on Tuesday. His sharp intake of breath told me this was worse than we'd expected. They must have someone at the court pushing this through. Regular competency hearings take weeks to schedule. Vanessa's cousin Melanie works as a clerk for Judge Hargrove, I said, the connections crystallizing in my mind. Remember? She was at the wedding. Jesus, Eleanor, how deep does this go? All the way to the bone, I said grimly. They'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. There was a pause before Richard spoke again, his voice heavy with realization. They know about the money, don't they? Not just the house. They know about your retirement fund. A chill ran through me. James and I had lived modestly, saving diligently for 4 decades. My teacher's pension was substantial, and James's life insurance policy had been generous. Including the house, my net worth approached $2 million. I'd always planned to leave it all to Michael eventually, with provisions for any grandchildren. Now I wondered if that had been the plan all along, not to wait, but to take. If they get guardianship, Richard continued, they'll have access to everything. Every account they can find. Except the trust, I said quietly. The trust Richard had helped me establish under my maiden name, Eleanor Simmons, with my sister as secondary trustee. Except the trust, he agreed. But we need to move fast. I'll file our counterpetition tomorrow morning, but we need evidence, hard evidence, of their plot. After hanging up, I went to my home office and opened the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet where I kept a leather-bound journal. Not a diary of thoughts and feelings, but a detailed record of every incident over the past year. Missing keys, moved items, appointments mysteriously rescheduled, medications that made me feel strange and foggy. Beside each entry, I'd noted date, time, and circumstances. I'd started keeping it after finding my blood pressure medication replaced with pills that looked similar but gave me terrible vertigo. When I'd confronted Michael, he'd suggested I was confused, that I'd mixed up my own medications. That was the moment my vague unease had crystallized into vigilance. Flipping through the journal now, I saw not isolated incidents, but a methodical campaign. Subtle at first, then increasingly bold. Gaslighting. That's what they called it now. In my day, we'd just called it cruel. The next morning, I drove to Lakeside Senior Center where I volunteered teaching computer skills. I hadn't told Richard about this part of my plan yet. Some battles you have to fight in your own way. Margaret Chen, the center's director and my friend of 15 years, was waiting in her office. On her desk was a portable scanner and a stack of consent forms. "Are you sure about this, Ellie?" she asked, her face lined with concern. "Once we start, there's no going back. They're trying to declare me incompetent, Maggie. If I don't fight back with everything I have, I'll spend my remaining years as a prisoner in some cut-rate facility while they live in my house and spend my money." She nodded grimly and handed me the first form. "The residents are ready whenever you are. 26 of them, just like you asked, all with advanced degrees or professional backgrounds, all over 65. For the next 3 hours, I administered the same cognitive tests that would be used in court. The mini mental state examination, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, and the clock drawing test. Each participant took the tests, then signed an affidavit confirming they'd taken them voluntarily as part of a research study on ageism in cognitive assessment. What they were actually doing was establishing baseline scores for high-functioning seniors. Scores that looked remarkably like mine would when I was inevitably tested. Margaret scanned everything, creating digital copies that couldn't disappear from a court file. "What else do you need?" "One more thing," I said, pulling out my phone. "I need you to record something." I showed her the text message I'd received from Michael that morning. "Mom, stop this nonsense. If you cooperate, we'll let you take your personal belongings. If you fight us, you'll lose everything." She read it, her face hardening. "Let me get this straight. Your son forged documents to steal your house, is trying to get guardianship to take your money, and now he's threatening you via text? And he thinks you're the incompetent one?" "Pride comes before a fall," I said quietly. And Michael always had too much pride. As I left Lakeside, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. "Mrs. Patterson?" A young man's voice, vaguely familiar. "It's Tyler. Tyler Dawson. From the bank." I remembered. A teller who had often helped me with deposits. "Yes, Tyler? I'm not supposed to be calling you," he said, his voice low. "But you were always nice to me, and what they're doing isn't right. Someone came in with a court order for your financial records." They're going through everything. Checking accounts, savings, investment portfolios, safe deposit access logs. They're looking for something specific. My blood ran cold. Did they find anything? Not what they wanted, he said. They seemed really angry about some missing money. Mrs. Patterson, I think you should be careful. The man who came in, your son, he scared me. After thanking Tyler and assuring him I'd be careful, I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel. They knew about the $800,000 transfer, but not where it had gone. They were searching, desperate to find it before the hearing. Time was running out for all of us, and I still had one card left to play, the most dangerous one of all. I almost didn't recognize the figure sitting on my porch steps when I pulled into the driveway. Hoodie pulled low, shoulders hunched against the April chill. He looked like any teenager trying to escape notice. But when he raised his head, I saw James's eyes looking back at me, my husband's eyes in my grandson's face. Gran? His voice cracked on the word. At 17, Ethan was caught in that awkward transition. Not quite boy, not quite man. I approached cautiously. Ethan and I had always been close, but I hadn't seen him in weeks. Not since this nightmare began. Are you alone? I asked, scanning the street for Michael's Mercedes or Vanessa's SUV. He nodded. They think I'm at debate practice. I took an Uber. He stood, towering over me now. When had that happened? Gran, what's going on? Dad and Mom are saying you're... He hesitated. That you're confused, that you need help. I studied his face, the furrow between his brows, the uncertainty in his eyes. Ethan had always been the peacemaker in the family, the one who smoothed things over when Michael and Vanessa argued, the one who quietly helped me with dishes after holiday meals while the others watched football. Do I seem confused to you? I asked simply. His eyes held mine. No, you seem angry. Yes, I admitted. I am angry. Come inside, Ethan. There are things you should know. In the kitchen, I made hot chocolate the way I had since he was small. Real chocolate melted into milk, a pinch of cinnamon, homemade marshmallows I kept in the freezer just for him. Some habits of love persist, even when the world is falling apart. As we sat at the table where his father had delivered his ultimatum just days before, I chose my words carefully. Your parents are trying to take my house and my savings. They've forged documents claiming I signed the house over to them. Now they're trying to get legal guardianship over me by claiming I'm mentally incompetent. Ethan's hands tightened around his mug. That's what they've been talking about? When they say you need supervision? I nodded. If they succeed, I'll lose all control over my life. Where I live, how I spend my money, my medical decisions, everything. But why would they? He stopped, the implication sinking in. The money. It's about your money, isn't it? So young, yet so perceptive. Yes, and the house, together, worth close to $2 million. He set his mug down with a thud, chocolate sloshing over the rim. No, Dad wouldn't. He complains about money sometimes, but he wouldn't. Ethan. I reached across the table and took his hand. I have proof, documents, recordings. Your father sent me this just this morning. I showed him the text message. He read it, color draining from his face. Oh God, I'm fighting this, I said gently. But it's going to get worse before it gets better. There's going to be a court hearing next week. Things will be said. Accusations made. What can I do? He asked, and in that moment he looked so much like the little boy who had once solemnly promised to slay dragons for me that my heart constricted. Nothing, I said firmly. This isn't your battle. You're 17. Your job is to focus on school, on your future. But you're my grandmother. They're lying about you. His voice rose, adolescent indignation flaring. And you're caught in the middle, I acknowledged. If you openly support me, you'll have to live with the consequences at home. I won't put you in that position. Ethan's jaw set in a stubborn line I recognized all too well. The same expression Michael had worn when insisting on trying out for varsity football despite his asthma. I don't care. What they're doing is wrong. There is one thing, I said slowly, an idea forming. Something that wouldn't involve you publicly taking sides. Anything. Information. I need to know what they're planning, what they're saying when they think no one's listening. Not to use against them, I added quickly, seeing his hesitation. To protect myself. He was silent for a long moment, moral calculus playing across his expressive face. Then he nodded once, decisively. I'll help. But Gran, There's something you should know about Dad's business. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. What about it? I overheard him on the phone last week. The investment group he manages, I think it's in trouble. Big trouble. He was talking about making investors whole and finding bridge capital. It sounded, he trailed off, like fraud, I suggested quietly. Ethan winced but nodded. He's been working all night, every night. Mom's been drinking more. They fight when they think I can't hear. Pieces clicked into place. Michael's desperation, the rushed timeline, the increasingly brazen tactics. This wasn't just greed, it was desperation. My son wasn't just trying to steal my nest egg. He was trying to save himself from disgrace, possibly even prison. There's something else, Ethan continued reluctantly. Yesterday, I found Mom looking through Dad's old photo albums from college. She was scanning pictures of you from back then. When I asked why, she got weird and closed the laptop. My mind raced. Photos from 30 years ago? What possible use? Understanding hit like a physical blow. They're creating a false narrative, I whispered. Looking for pictures where I look intoxicated or confused. College parties, maybe. To suggest a long history of issues. Ethan looked ill. Gran, I'm so sorry. Don't be. Knowledge is power. I squeezed his hand. Now I know to counter with my own documentation. The grandfather clock in the hallway, a wedding gift from James's parents, chimed 4 times, startling us both. You should go, I said reluctantly, before they get suspicious. As I walked him to the door, Ethan suddenly turned and hugged me fiercely. I believe you, he whispered, and I have access to Mom's cloud storage. She backs up everything, texts, emails, photos. I know her password. I pulled back to look at him, this nearly grown man with a child's trust in his eyes. Ethan, be careful. What you're suggesting is the right thing to do, he finished firmly. You taught me that, Gran, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. After he left, I called Richard again, my mind racing with new possibilities. My grandson had just handed me the keys to the kingdom, evidence that might not be admissible in court, but could give us the roadmap we needed. Richard, it's me. I need a computer expert, someone discreet, and I need them tonight. Eleanor, what are you planning? I watched Ethan's retreating figure through the window, shoulders squared with newfound purpose, and felt an unexpected surge of hope. I'm planning to save my son from himself, I said quietly, even if he hates me for it. By 8 p.m. that evening, my dining room had been transformed into a command center. Richard had arrived with Sofia Diaz, a former FBI cyber specialist who now worked as a digital forensic consultant. Compact, efficient, with close-cropped gray hair and tortoiseshell glasses, she exuded competence as she set up her equipment on my antique mahogany table. Mrs. Patterson, she acknowledged with a brisk nod. Richard explained your situation. Computer fraud and elder exploitation cases are unfortunately common in my practice. Will this be legal? I asked, eyeing the array of devices now covering the hand-crocheted tablecloth my mother had made. Sophia's lips twitched. We're not hacking anything, if that's your concern. Your grandson has provided consensual access to accounts registered in his name and shared family accounts he has authorized access to. As for the rest, she shrugged, we're merely documenting evidence of crimes committed against you. Richard placed a hand on my shoulder. Everything we're doing falls under preparing your legal defense, Eleanor. Attorney-client privilege covers this activity. I nodded, still uneasy but resolute. At exactly 8:30, my phone chimed with a text from Ethan. All clear. Mom and Dad at dinner with the Hayworths until 10. Using Mom's laptop now. Sophia immediately began typing, her fingers flying across her keyboard. He's sending the access information now. Smart kid. He's using Signal for encrypted messaging. He's always been good with computers, I said, a grandmother's pride momentarily displacing my anxiety. He built his first gaming PC at 12. Well, he's about to help build a case against his parents, Richard murmured. Are you sure about involving him, Eleanor? Before I could answer, Sophia let out a low whistle. We're in, and oh my. She turned her laptop toward us. On the screen was an email from Michael to someone named Carson Weiss, Vanessa's brother-in-law, I realized, a real estate attorney. C. Need to expedite the property transfer. Mother showing increased resistance. V suggests pursuing incompetency, ruling ASAP. Have Melanie fast-track with Judge H documentation attached, including historical evidence of instability. Financial situation critical. Investors threatening action if capital not secured by end of month. House equity and retirement accounts would provide necessary stopgap. M. The email was dated February 15th, weeks before they'd confronted me with their scheme. There's more, Sophia said, scrolling through a folder labeled Patterson Estate. Detailed inventories of your possessions, appraisals of artwork and jewelry, lists of accounts they believe you have, financial projections for how they'd allocate your assets. She paused at a document titled Cognitive Assessment Strategy. This is meticulous. They've been documenting every time you've forgotten something, misplaced something, or made a mistake for the past 8 months. My stomach clenched. I rarely forget anything. They've been moving my things, changing appointments without telling me, creating a paper trail of cognitive decline, Richard said grimly. Classic elder abuse tactic. There's something else, Sophia said, opening another folder. Financial records for Meridian Capital Partners, your son's investment firm, balance sheets, investor correspondence. She scanned the documents, her expression darkening. Mrs. Patterson, your grandson was right. Your son's business is in serious trouble. Richard leaned over her shoulder, adjusting his reading glasses. He's been running a Ponzi scheme, he said after a moment, his voice hollow with disbelief. Using new investor funds to pay returns to earlier investors while siphoning off millions for personal use. Michael wouldn't, I began automatically, then stopped myself. The Michael I thought I knew wouldn't steal his mother's house either, yet here we were. The evidence suggests otherwise, Sophia said gently. According to these projections, the scheme is about to collapse. Without an immediate infusion of at least $1.5 million, he won't be able to meet next month's obligations to investors. My hand went to my throat, to the pendant James had given me on our 30th anniversary. That's why they need my money. That's why they can't wait for me to die naturally. The words felt strange in my mouth, bitter and sharp. There's more, Sophia continued, opening an email thread between Michael and Vanessa. They've already put a deposit on a house in Costa Rica, non-extradition country. They're planning to flee, Richard said, his lawyer's mind connecting dots faster than my stunned brain could process. Take your money and run before the investment fraud is discovered. What about Ethan? I asked, panic rising. They wouldn't leave him behind. The answer came in the next email Sophia opened. Enrollment confirmation for International Academy of San Jose, a boarding school in Costa Rica's capital. Tuition paid in full for the coming academic year. They're taking him with them, I whispered, uprooting him from everything he knows. Mrs. Patterson, Sophia said carefully, this goes well beyond attempting to defraud you. This is major securities fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy, possibly even kidnapping if they're planning to take your grandson out of the country without proper consent. The FBI and SEC would be very interested in this information. Richard was already shaking his head. We need to be strategic. If we go to the authorities now, Michael could flee immediately. We need to secure Eleanor's assets and safety first, then address the larger criminal issues. But Ethan, I protested. We'll be warned, Richard assured me. But if we move too quickly, we risk losing everything, including the chance to help your grandson in the long run. My phone chimed again, Ethan alerting us that his parents' dinner was ending early. Sophia quickly began copying files to an external drive. I've got what we need, she said, and I've left no trace of our access. As they packed up their equipment, the reality of what we'd discovered settled over me like a shroud. My son was not just trying to steal from me. He was a criminal, on the verge of destruction, willing to sacrifice his own mother to delay the inevitable. What now? I asked Richard as he prepared to leave. Now we revise our strategy, he said, his face grim but determined. This isn't just about defending your competency anymore. It's about stopping a flight risk and protecting your grandson. After they left, I sat alone in my dining room, the ghost of family dinners past hovering in the shadows. Thanksgiving turkeys carved at the head of this table, Christmas cookies decorated here, maple syrup staining the wood despite placemats. Ethan learning to play chess across from me, his small face scrunched in concentration. I placed my palms flat on the cool surface, steadying myself. James, I whispered to my late husband's memory, what would you do? How do I save our son from himself? How do I protect our grandson? No answer came, but as I sat in the gathering darkness, A plan began to form, one that might save all of us, even if it meant sacrificing the future I had imagined. The next morning dawned clear and cold, sunlight slanting through kitchen windows that needed washing, a task that seemed laughably unimportant now. I'd slept little, my mind churning with revelations and possibilities until I'd finally risen at 4 a.m. to make detailed notes. When Richard called at 7:30, I was already on my second cup of tea, calm in the way that comes only after passing through a storm of emotion into its quiet eye. "I've been thinking," I told him without preamble. "We need to move up our timeline. Eleanor, they're planning to flee the country, Richard, with my grandson. We can't wait for the competency hearing. By then, it might be too late." There was a pause, then a resigned sigh. "What do you propose?" "A confrontation. Today. On my terms, with evidence in hand." "That's incredibly risky," Richard protested. "If they feel cornered, they already feel cornered," I countered. "That's why they're accelerating their plans. But they don't know that we know. We have the element of surprise." By 10 a.m., the pieces were in place. Richard had secured an emergency injunction freezing all my accounts pending the competency hearing, accounts that Michael and Vanessa believed contained my life savings. Sophia had compiled a digital dossier of evidence, encrypted and backed up in multiple locations, and I had called Michael, my voice carefully calibrated to sound defeated and resigned. "I'd like to talk," I'd told him, "about the arrangements for after I move." His relief had been palpable, even through the phone. "That's great, Mom. Really great. We can come over around noon?" "Perfect," I'd replied, hating the false note of surrender in my voice, but knowing it was necessary. Now I sat in my living room, surrounded by photographs and memories, waiting for the doorbell to ring. Beside me was a legal pad with notes, a digital recorder, and a small device Sophia had provided, a signal jammer that would prevent them from making calls or sending messages once our conversation began. At exactly noon they arrived. Michael in a pressed blue shirt and khakis, Vanessa in a floral dress that screamed spring optimism, both wearing carefully constructed masks of concern. "Mom," Michael said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I allowed it, though it took every ounce of will not to flinch. "You're looking well. Thank you for agreeing to talk," Vanessa added, settling onto the sofa across from me. "We know this is difficult." I smiled thinly. "Yes. Finding out your only child is committing fraud and planning to flee to Costa Rica with your grandson is indeed difficult." The change was instantaneous, like watching masks slide from their faces in unison. Michael went rigid, while Vanessa's complexion turned ashen. "What are you talking about?" Michael attempted, but his voice lacked conviction. "Meridian Capital Partners," I said calmly. "Your Ponzi scheme, the missing investor funds, the house in San Jose, Ethan's new school." Michael's face contorted, rage replacing shock. "You've been spying on us?" "I've been protecting myself," I corrected, "just as you've been protecting me by documenting my supposed cognitive decline." Vanessa recovered first, her socialite's training kicking in as she forced a laugh. "Michael, your mother is confused again. This is exactly why—" "Stop!" I activated Sophia's device with a click. "Your phones won't work now, so don't bother trying to call your attorney or your cousin the court clerk. It's just us, having an honest conversation at last." I opened the folder beside me and withdrew copies of the emails we'd discovered, sliding them across the coffee table. "You're facing securities fraud charges that carry up to 20 years in federal prison, Michael. Not to mention elder abuse, attempted financial exploitation, and conspiracy." He didn't touch the papers, but his eyes scanned the top document, and I watched the blood drain from his face. "How did you—" he began, then stopped, realization dawning. "Ethan, he helped you. He loves his grandmother," I said simply, "and he deserves better than being dragged to another country as part of your escape plan." Michael stood abruptly, pacing like a caged animal. "You don't understand. These investors, they're not small-timers. If I can't pay them back, they won't just sue me. They'll hurt you?" I finished quietly. "Is that why you were willing to destroy me? Physical fear?" "We never wanted to hurt you," Vanessa interjected, her perfect facade cracking. "The facility in Arizona is very nice. You'd have been comfortable. While you emptied my accounts and sold my home," I added, "using a false incompetency ruling to give yourselves legal cover." Michael whirled to face me. "What choice did I have?" he demanded, voice rising. "The market turned. Investments failed. I just needed time to recover, but everyone wanted their money now. So you started using new investor money to pay the old ones, I said. A classic Ponzi scheme, just like Bernie Madoff. I am nothing like Madoff, he shouted, spittle flying from his lips. I was going to pay everyone back. I just needed breathing room. And my retirement savings were going to provide that breathing room, I said flatly, along with the equity from this house. Vanessa placed a restraining hand on Michael's arm. What do you want? She asked me directly, her voice cold and calculating. Money? A different arrangement? I almost laughed at the absurdity, that they still thought this was a negotiation, that I might settle for some crumbs from my own table. I want to save my grandson from growing up with the shame of his father in prison and his mother as an accomplice, I said quietly. And despite everything, I want to save my son from himself. I slid another document across the table, this one prepared by Richard just hours earlier. This is your way out, I explained. A clean dissolution of Meridian Capital Partners, full restitution to your investors using the $800,000 from my trust and a loan against this house. In exchange, the evidence of fraud never reaches the SEC or FBI. Michael stared at the papers, then at me, suspicion warring with desperate hope in his eyes. Why would you help me after what I tried to do to you? Because I'm your mother, I said simply. And because this agreement includes 3 non-negotiable conditions. I held up one finger. First, you and Vanessa will withdraw all competency proceedings against me and acknowledge in writing that you fabricated evidence. A second finger. Second, you will both enter therapy, separately and as a couple, to address whatever broke inside you that made stealing from your mother seem acceptable. A third finger. And third, you will tell Ethan the complete truth. Everything. He deserves to know who his parents really are and what real accountability looks like. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Vanessa looked at Michael, her expression unreadable. Michael stared at the documents, his breathing ragged. If we refuse? He finally asked. Then by 5 p.m. today, the FBI, SEC, and district attorney will have complete documentation of your financial crimes and the elder abuse conspiracy. Your assets will be frozen, your passports flagged. You'll never make it to Costa Rica. Michael sank onto the sofa, head in his hands. You would send your own son to prison? I leaned forward, meeting his eyes directly. You would steal your mother's home and life savings and abandon her to strangers? For the first time, I saw something like shame flicker across his face. The choice is yours, I said, rising to my feet. I'll give you 1 hour to decide. I suggest you use it wisely. I left them in the living room with the documents and retreated to the kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs so violently I feared they might hear it. Through the doorway, I could see them huddled together, voices low and urgent, occasionally glancing toward me as if I might be recording their deliberations. Which, of course, I was. The small device tucked into my cardigan pocket, capturing every word. Vanessa was arguing for refusing my offer, her voice rising occasionally above a whisper. We can still fight this. Her word against ours. And who's going to believe an old woman with no... She has evidence, Michael hissed back. Emails, financial records. How the hell did she get all this? I busied myself making tea, the familiar ritual steadying my trembling hands. The kitchen clock ticked relentlessly toward their deadline, 1:17 p.m. I'd given them precisely 1 hour. At 1:09, Michael appeared in the doorway, his face haggard, eyes bloodshot. For a moment, I saw the little boy who had come to me at 7 years old, confessing to breaking a neighbor's window with his baseball, scared but summoning courage to face consequences. If we agree to your terms, he said hoarsely, how do we know you won't turn us in anyway? After what we tried to do to you, why would you keep your word? I poured hot water over the tea leaves, watching them unfurl in the pot. Because unlike you, I still believe family means something. Because despite everything, you're still my son. And because Ethan deserves a father who made amends, not one who ran away or went to prison. Ethan, he repeated, the name seeming to deflate him further. He knows everything, doesn't he? That's how you got the emails. I nodded. Not initially. He came to me confused about what was happening. The rest he discovered on his own. Michael leaned against the doorframe, suddenly looking every day of his 42 years, and then some. He'll never forgive me. Perhaps not immediately, I acknowledged, arranging cups on a tray. Forgiveness takes time. But teenagers are remarkably resilient when given honesty. It's the lies that do lasting damage. Vanessa appeared behind him, her perfect makeup now smudged around the eyes. "We need guarantees," she said, steel still in her voice. "Written assurances that once we've met your conditions, you'll destroy all evidence." I smiled thinly. "Page 4, paragraph 3 of the agreement. Richard anticipated your concern." "Of course he did," Michael muttered. "You're a tack dog lawyer." "My friend," I corrected, "who helped me protect myself when my own family turned against me." A painful silence filled the kitchen, broken only by the soft tick of the clock. "We'll sign," Michael finally said, not looking at Vanessa, whose lips tightened into a bloodless line. "We don't have a choice." "We always have choices, Michael," I said, lifting the tea tray. "You chose to defraud your investors. You chose to try to steal my house and savings. Now you're choosing a harder path, but a better one." Back in the living room, they signed every page of the agreement, the scratch of pen on paper unnaturally loud in the tense silence. When they finished, I took the documents and placed them carefully in a folder. "What happens now?" Vanessa asked, sounding smaller somehow, her carefully constructed facade of confidence crumbling. "Now we begin the process of making things right," I said, "starting with Ethan." Michael's head snapped up. "Now? Today?" "Yes. He's waiting at Richard's office. We'll go there together, and you will tell him everything. The financial troubles, the plan against me, all of it." "He'll hate us," Vanessa whispered. "He'll be angry and hurt," I corrected. "With good reason. But he needs to hear the truth from you, not pieces and fragments he's discovered on his own." Before we left, I made one last call to Richard, confirming that everything was proceeding as planned. As I hung up, I noticed Michael staring at the photograph on the side table. James and me on our 30th anniversary, my head thrown back in laughter at something he'd said. "Dad would be ashamed of me," Michael said quietly. "Yes," I agreed, seeing no point in comforting lies. "But he would have given you this same chance to make amends." He believed in redemption. The drive to Richard's office was silent and tense. Vanessa stared out the window, physically present, but emotionally absent. Michael drove mechanically, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. When we arrived, Richard met us in the lobby, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes conveying concern as they met mine. "Everyone's upstairs, conference room A." In the elevator, Michael turned to me suddenly. "Did you ever suspect, before all this?" I considered lying, then decided we'd had enough deception. "Yes, little things at first. Comments about the house being too big for me. Questions about my finances that seemed too probing. Then my medication started making me feel strange." His face paled. "You knew we were drugging you?" "I didn't swallow them," I said simply. "I've been flushing them for months. But the fact that you tried told me everything I needed to know about how far you were willing to go." The elevator doors opened, cutting off whatever response he might have made. Ethan was waiting in the conference room, looking both older and younger than his 17 years, shoulders squared with forced maturity, eyes vulnerable with hurt. Beside him sat Sophia, who nodded professionally at us, and a man I didn't recognize, who Richard introduced as Martin Greer, a forensic accountant. "Mom? Dad?" Ethan stood uncertainly. "What's happening?" Michael stepped forward, then stopped, seemingly unable to find words. I touched his arm gently. "Tell him," I urged quietly. "All of it." And so he did, haltingly at first, then with increasing fluidity as confession became unburdening. The failed investments, the desperate measures to keep investors from discovering losses, the growing debt, the plan to use my assets to buy time. Vanessa remained largely silent, occasionally interjecting with justifications that rang hollow even to her own ears. Ethan listened without interrupting, his young face cycling through shock, disbelief, anger, and finally a profound sadness that made him look impossibly adult. When Michael finished, the room fell silent. Ethan looked at me, then back at his parents. "You were going to put Gran in a home and take her money," he said flatly, "after everything she's done for us, for me." "Ethan, we were desperate," Vanessa began, but he cut her off with a gesture so reminiscent of his grandfather that my breath caught. "Don't," he said sharply. "Just don't make excuses." He turned to me, his eyes swimming with unshed tears. "I'm sorry, Gran. I should have told you sooner what I suspected. You did exactly what you should have. I assured him, reaching for his hand. And now, we're going to fix this. Together. Richard cleared his throat. The restitution plan is already in motion. Mrs. Patterson's trust funds will be used to partially repay investors, alongside the equity loan on the house. Mr. Greer will oversee the dissolution of Meridian Capital and ensure all documentation is properly filed with regulatory authorities. What about us? Ethan asked, the question hanging in the air like a physical thing. Where do we go from here? I squeezed his hand. One step at a time, I said gently. One honest step at a time. 3 weeks after the confrontation, I stood in my garden, deadheading roses, the familiar rhythm of the task bringing a semblance of normalcy to days that had been anything but normal. May sunshine warmed my shoulders as I carefully pruned away spent blooms, making room for new growth. Need help with those? I turned to see Ethan standing at the garden gate, backpack slung over one shoulder. Since that day in Richard's office, he'd taken to stopping by after school 3 times a week. Sometimes to talk, sometimes just to sit in companionable silence as I puttered around the house or garden. Always, I smiled, handing him a pair of gloves. How was the calculus test? Aced it, he said, joining me among the rose bushes. Mr. Peterson said my proof was elegant, whatever that means in math speak. It means you impressed him, I said. Your grandfather would be proud. We worked side by side, the snip of shears punctuating our conversation about school, friends, normal teenage concerns that felt precious in their ordinariness. Neither of us mentioned the elephant that had taken up residence in our lives, the ongoing legal and financial untangling of Michael's fraud, the twice-weekly therapy sessions, the awkward new reality of our family, until Ethan set down his shears and asked, "Have you heard from Dad today?" I shook my head. Not since Monday. We're meeting tomorrow with the financial advisor. Another silence fell, this one heavier. He's trying, Gran, Ethan said finally. I know it doesn't make up for what he did, but he's really trying. I know, I said gently. People can change when they're brave enough to face their mistakes. Ethan snipped viciously at a withered bloom. Mom's not changing. She's just angrier. She thinks we all betrayed her. The pain in his voice made my heart ache. Vanessa had taken the exposure of their scheme as a personal attack, retreating into cold fury rather than remorse. While Michael had embraced the accountability plan with something approaching relief, Vanessa had participated only under duress, attending therapy sessions with rigid compliance, but no apparent insight. Some people need more time to accept responsibility, I said carefully. Your mother's pride was a big part of her identity. Her pride, Ethan echoed bitterly. That's why we were going to steal your house and money? So she could keep pretending we were rich? I set down my gardening tools and faced him directly. Ethan, listen to me. What your parents did was wrong. Deeply, unforgivably wrong. But understanding why people do terrible things doesn't excuse those actions. It just helps us make sense of them. He looked away, blinking rapidly. Dad says he did it because he was scared, that these investors were dangerous people. Fear makes people do desperate things, I acknowledged. But there were other options. He could have come to me honestly, asked for help. Would you have helped him? Ethan asked, genuine curiosity in his voice, even knowing he'd committed fraud. I considered the question carefully, owing him the truth rather than a comforting platitude. I would have been devastated by his choices, angry, disappointed. But yes, I would have helped him find a legal way forward. Not by covering up his crimes, but by facing them with him. Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing this. Last night, I heard them fighting again. Mom wants to move, says she can't face people here anymore. Dad says we have to stay and face the music. It's like they're not even the same people I knew a month ago. They're not, I said simply. Crisis reveals character, sometimes even to ourselves. Your father is discovering he has the courage to face consequences. Your mother is still finding her way. I didn't add what we both knew, that Vanessa might never find that way, that their marriage might not survive this reckoning. Some truths were too heavy to voice aloud, especially to a child caught in the crossfire. I've been thinking, Ethan said, changing the subject with transparent relief, about college next year. Harvard is still your dream, isn't it? I'd been saving for his education since the day he was born, a separate account Michael hadn't known about, thankfully. It was, he admitted. But now I'm thinking about UVA. Their computer science program is excellent, and it's only 2 hours away. Ethan, I said gently, don't make decisions based on worrying about me. I'm not going anywhere. He met my eyes, suddenly looking very grown up. It's not just about you, Gran. It's about me too. After everything that's happened, I want to be somewhere that feels grounded, connected to what matters. My throat tightened with unexpected emotion. Well, UVA would be lucky to have you. We returned to our gardening, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. As the afternoon waned, I invited him to stay for dinner, but he declined. Dad's cooking tonight, he explained. Part of his new be present thing from therapy. Last week he made lasagna that was actually edible. Progress indeed, I smiled, walking him to the gate. After he left, I continued working in the garden until dusk, thoughts turning to the meeting scheduled for tomorrow. Michael, Richard, the financial advisor, and I would be reviewing the final restitution plan for the investors. Most had agreed to accept 80 cents on the dollar, relieved to recover any portion of their investments and eager to avoid the publicity of a fraud case. My $800,000 trust fund was gone, transferred directly to the restitution pool. The home equity loan had provided another $400,000. Michael had surrendered their vacation property in the Outer Banks and liquidated investment accounts, contributing another $300,000. All told, nearly $1.7 million had been assembled to repay the $2.1 million owed. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was the best possible outcome given the circumstances. No criminal charges, no prison time, but significant financial penalties and mandatory financial oversight for 5 years. As twilight deepened into night, I gathered my gardening tools and headed inside, bones aching from the unaccustomed labor. In the kitchen, I washed dirt from beneath my fingernails and contemplated dinner, settling on a simple omelet. The house felt different now, neither the threatened space it had been during Michael's scheme, nor the lonely widow's dwelling it had been after James died. It was mine again, securely mine, though changed by the knowledge of what had nearly happened within its walls. As I whisked eggs in a bowl, the phone rang. Michael, calling to confirm tomorrow's meeting. His voice still carried the strained quality that had become its hallmark these past weeks, a mixture of shame, determination, and fragile hope. Mom, before we hang up, he said awkwardly, I wanted to say thank you for giving me a chance to fix this, to be better. You're doing the work, Michael, I said, neither absolving nor condemning. That's what matters now. After we hung up, I finished making my simple dinner and carried it to the dining room table, the same table where Sophia had uncovered the evidence of Michael's crimes. Life was full of such ironies, spaces that held both betrayal and healing, often simultaneously. As I ate alone in the gathering darkness, I thought about redemption, how it rarely comes as a lightning bolt of transformation, but instead arrives in small daily acts of atonement. Michael cooking dinner for his son, Ethan choosing a college that kept him connected to family, me deadheading roses to make room for new blooms. None of us would ever be the same, but perhaps, in time, we might become something stronger in the broken places. Summer arrived with punishing heat and the slow, painful rebirth of something resembling normal life. By July, the legal arrangements were finalized, the investors paid according to the negotiated settlement, and Meridian Capital Partners officially dissolved. Michael had found work at an accounting firm, a significant step down in prestige and pay from running his own investment company, but steady employment with a boss willing to give him a second chance, provided he disclosed his history. On the third Thursday in July, I sat on my porch swing waiting for Richard to arrive. We had fallen into the habit of weekly afternoon meetings, ostensibly to review lingering legal matters, but increasingly just to enjoy each other's company. At 71, Richard was 4 years my senior, a widower with a dry wit and a kind heart beneath his lawyerly exterior. Today, though, our meeting had a specific purpose. I'd made a decision that required legal assistance, one I hoped I wouldn't regret. Lemonade looks refreshing, Richard commented as he settled beside me on the swing, accepting the glass I offered, though this heat might call for something stronger. It's barely 3 o'clock, I chided, though I smiled as I said it. A mere technicality. He took a long sip, then set the glass on the small table beside us. So, you're sure about this? I nodded, gazing out at the street where neighborhood children rode bikes through sprinklers set up on lawns. I've given it considerable thought. Amending a trust is no small matter, Eleanor, especially given recent events. That's precisely why it needs amending, I said firmly. The original trust left everything to Michael, with provisions for Ethan's education. Obviously, circumstances have changed. Richard sighed, retrieving documents from his briefcase. The new structure would place half your estate in trust for Ethan, accessible in staged distributions at 25, 30, and 35. The remaining half would go to Michael, but only after a 10-year waiting period following your death, and contingent upon completion of financial counseling and continued ethical business practices. And the house, I prompted, as discussed, held in a separate life estate that allows you full control during your lifetime. Upon your passing, it converts to a restricted family property trust that prevents sale for 20 years. Michael, Vanessa, and Ethan would have equal rights to use it, but not to sell or borrow against it. I nodded, satisfied. The house stays in the family, but nobody profits from it financially. That's what I want. Richard studied me over his reading glasses. May I speak frankly? As your friend, rather than your attorney? When have you ever held back? I smiled. These terms are generous toward Michael, considering what he attempted to do to you. Most people in your position would disinherit him entirely. I gazed at the porch ceiling, gathering thoughts that had been forming for months. Punishment isn't my goal, Richard. Protection is. I'm protecting Ethan's future while giving Michael a path to redemption that doesn't include temptation. And Vanessa? He asked carefully. Benefits only through her marriage to Michael and her status as Ethan's mother, I acknowledged. I haven't found forgiveness there yet. Perhaps I never will. Richard nodded, understanding. Vanessa had remained coldly hostile throughout the process, attending required meetings with rigid formality, but no warmth. Unlike Michael, who carried his shame visibly in slumped shoulders and eyes that couldn't quite meet mine, Vanessa wore hers as armor, brittle, defensive, unrepentant. We spent the next hour reviewing and signing documents, the legal language a poor vessel for the complex emotions behind my decisions. When we finished, Richard gathered the papers and stood to leave. Will you tell them about the changes? He asked. Michael, yes. Soon. He needs to understand there are lasting consequences, even with forgiveness. As for the details, those can wait until my will is actually executed, hopefully many years from now. After Richard left, I remained on the porch, watching shadows lengthen across the lawn as afternoon drifted toward evening. The weight of decisions made and yet to be made pressed on me, not unpleasantly but persistently, like a hand resting on my shoulder. At 5:30, a familiar car pulled into my driveway, Michael's new used sedan, a practical Camry that had replaced his leased luxury vehicle. He emerged looking tired but composed, dress shirt wrinkled from a day at the office, tie loosened at his neck. Mom, he greeted me, climbing the porch steps. Got your message. Everything okay? Fine, I assured him, patting the swing beside me. Sit. I thought we might talk before dinner. He settled cautiously, the swing creaking beneath our combined weight. Ethan mentioned you invited us for Sunday. That's still good? Of course. I'm making pot roast. A small smile flickered across his face. Dad's favorite. Yes, I agreed softly. James had been gone 6 years now, but his absence still echoed in these small moments of remembering. We sat in silence for a moment, the swing moving gently back and forth, cicadas humming in the oak trees flanking the yard. I amended my trust today, I said finally, deciding directness was kindest, and my will. Michael stiffened slightly but nodded, eyes fixed on the porch railing. I assumed you would, after everything. You're still included, I continued, watching his face carefully. But with conditions and delays that weren't there before. Ethan will receive his portion directly. He exhaled slowly. That's more than fair, more than I deserve. It's not about deserving, Michael. It's about learning. He turned to look at me then, his eyes, so like his father's, swimming with emotions too complex to name. I keep trying to understand how I got here, how I became someone who could do what I tried to do to you. And? My therapist says it was a perfect storm, financial pressure, fear, entitlement, rationalization. But those are just words. They don't explain why I was willing to betray my own mother. I considered this, choosing my response carefully. When your father died, what did you feel? Beyond grief. He seemed startled by the question. I don't know. Lost. Angry. Scared, I guess. Scared of what? Of not measuring up. The admission came reluctantly. Dad was so solid. Dependable. Everyone respected him. I always felt like I was pretending to be what he was naturally. I nodded. pieces falling into place. So you built a life that looked successful on the outside, even when it was hollow within. And when that facade started to crack, I was willing to do anything to keep it from collapsing, he finished quietly. Even hurt the people I should have protected. Tears pricked behind my eyes, but I blinked them away. Your father wasn't perfect, Michael. No one is. The difference was that he accepted his imperfections rather than hiding them. I'm trying to learn that, he said. It's harder than I expected. I reached over and took his hand, the first time I'd initiated physical contact since the confrontation. Most worthwhile things are. His fingers tightened around mine, and for a moment we sat connected. The weight between us not gone, but somehow shared, made lighter by acknowledgement. Will you tell Ethan? He asked eventually. About the changes to your will? No, I said firmly. He has enough to process right now. His inheritance isn't something he needs to think about at 17. Michael nodded, relieved. And Vanessa? That's for you to decide. She's your wife. A shadow crossed his face. For now. Trouble? I asked, though I wasn't surprised. She wants to move to Charlotte. Start over where people don't know what happened. I told her I need to stay here and face things. We're at an impasse. I said nothing, knowing this was his journey to navigate, his consequence to bear. I should go, he said, rising. Ethan has debate practice until 7, but I promise to have dinner ready when he gets home. As he stepped off the porch, he turned back. Mom, thank you. Not just for including me in your will, but for showing me what real strength looks like. After he drove away, I remained on the swing until darkness fell, thinking about trust, how easily broken, how painfully rebuilt. The cicadas sang their summer song, reminding me that even in broken places, life continues its stubborn, persistent cycle of renewal. October painted my maple trees crimson and gold, a fiery counterpoint to the cooling air. 1 year had passed since my retirement, 10 months since Michael and Vanessa's betrayal, 6 months since the legal resolution that had saved my son from prison but cost me my life savings. The seasons had turned, and with them, our lives had found new configurations, some bitter, some sweet, all irrevocably changed. On a bright Saturday morning, I stood in my kitchen measuring coffee grounds when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Vanessa, an uncommon sight these days. Since their separation 3 months ago, she had largely disappeared from my life, communicating only through Michael or Ethan when absolutely necessary. I opened the door with cautious politeness. Vanessa, this is unexpected. She looked thinner than I remembered, her designer clothes hanging slightly loose, dark circles visible beneath expertly applied concealer. May I come in? I won't stay long. I gestured her inside, noting the stiff formality in her posture as she perched on the edge of the living room sofa, the same spot where, nearly a year ago, she had sat beside Michael as they explained their plans to take my house. Would you like coffee? I offered, more out of ingrained hospitality than warmth. No, thank you. Her hands twisted nervously in her lap. I came to tell you in person. I've accepted a job in Chicago. I'm leaving next week. I see. I settled into my armchair, digesting this information. Does Ethan know? Pain flashed across her face. Yes, he's not taking it well. He refuses to split time between Michael and me. Says he's staying here. I wasn't surprised. Ethan had begun his freshman year at UVA, but came home most weekends, his need for the stability of familiar surroundings evident in his frequent returns. The thought of his mother moving 600 miles away would feel like another abandonment. I'm not here to ask you to intervene, Vanessa continued, correctly reading my thoughts. Ethan is 18 now. He makes his own choices. Then why are you here? I asked directly. She met my eyes for the first time, her gaze surprisingly vulnerable. To apologize. Of all the things I might have expected, this wasn't one of them. I stayed silent, waiting. What we did, what I helped plan, was unforgivable, she said, her voice gaining strength as she continued. I've spent months being angry at everyone else, at Michael for getting caught, at Ethan for taking your side, at you for fighting back. But the truth is, I'm the one who pushed hardest for the guardianship plan. I'm the one who contacted my cousin at the court. I'm the one who suggested the medications. Cold recognition washed through me at this confirmation of what I'd long suspected, that Vanessa had been the architect behind the more insidious aspects of their scheme. Why? I asked simply. Why did you hate me so much? She flinched. I didn't hate you, I just Didn't see you. You weren't a person to me. Just an obstacle. A problem to solve. She paused, seeming to search for words. My therapist says I have a narcissistic personality disorder, that I objectify people who don't serve my goals. And you believe that diagnosis? I kept my voice neutral. I fought it for months, she admitted. But yes, I'm beginning to see it's true. She smoothed invisible wrinkles from her slacks. The job in Chicago comes with a condition: continued intensive therapy. My father arranged it. It's my last chance to fix whatever is broken in me. I studied the woman before me, my son's wife, my grandson's mother, the person who had plotted to drug me into compliance, and found myself feeling something unexpected: pity. I hope you find what you're looking for in Chicago, I said finally. And I hope you maintain a relationship with Ethan, whatever form that takes. She nodded, standing abruptly. I won't ask for your forgiveness. I haven't earned it. No, I agreed quietly. You haven't. At the door she turned back, her expression unguarded for perhaps the first time in our decade-long relationship. For what it's worth, I admire what you did, how you fought back. I hope if I ever reach your age, I have half your strength. After she left, I stood at the window watching her drive away, her car growing smaller until it disappeared around the corner. Some chapters close more quietly than they open, I reflected, with whispers rather than explosions. The following Thursday, exactly 1 year after my retirement party, I stood before a different audience in a community center meeting room. 24 women ranging in age from 60 to 85 sat in folding chairs, notebooks open, expressions attentive. Financial independence is more than having money, I told them, my teacher's voice steady and clear. It's about control, knowledge, the power to make your own choices, regardless of what others think is best for you. This was the third session of the 8-week course I'd developed, Financial Self-Defense for Senior Women. What had begun as casual conversations with friends had evolved into a structured program covering everything from basic estate planning to recognizing signs of financial exploitation. Next week we'll discuss trusts and alternate banking arrangements, I continued, including how to create emergency funds that family members can't access or even know about. A woman in the front row, Beatrice, a 72-year-old widow whose son had borrowed her retirement savings for a business venture that never materialized, raised her hand. Is that legal? Secret accounts? Absolutely, I assured her. Your money is yours to manage as you see fit. Privacy isn't deception, it's protection. After the session, as I gathered my materials, Richard appeared at the door, a welcome sight in his charcoal suit and burgundy tie. We had been seeing each other, cautiously, tenderly, for 2 months now, rediscovering the sweet awkwardness of late-life romance. Successful class? He asked, helping me with my folders. I think so. 3 women requested private consultations about changing their estate plans. Good, that's good. He hesitated. Ready for dinner? I made reservations at Alessandro's. Our table by the window? I smiled, accepting his arm as we walked to the parking lot. Of course. He stopped before opening my car door. Eleanor, there's something I wanted to ask you. That sounds ominous, I teased, though my heart quickened. Not ominous, just important. He took both my hands in his. I've been thinking about the future, our future, specifically, how we might share more of it. Richard Harmon, are you proposing? I'm proposing we consider possibilities, he said carefully. At our age, marriage comes with complications, financial entanglements, family expectations, Medicare implications. I laughed despite myself. Only a lawyer would include Medicare in a proposal. Former lawyer, he corrected, smiling. But yes, occupational hazard. The point is, I love you, Eleanor. I think I have since James's funeral, though I didn't let myself acknowledge it then. I want to build whatever time we have left together. Warmth spread through me, a feeling I'd thought long past. I'd like that too. Over dinner we discussed practical arrangements. My house or his, mine with its memory-filled rooms and gardening space, how to handle holidays, alternating families, what to tell our children, the simple truth. It wasn't the passionate planning of young lovers, but something equally precious. The measured, clear-eyed choice of 2 people who had seen life's harshest realities and still chose connection. When I returned home that night, I found Ethan waiting on my porch, home from college for the weekend. Gran, I tried calling. He stopped, noticing my dressy outfit and flushed cheeks. Were you on a date? As a matter of fact, I was, I admitted, unlocking the door. With Richard. Your lawyer? His eyebrows shot up, then he grinned. Cool. Dad mentioned you two were seeing each other. He thinks it's great, by the way. Inside, over hot chocolate, Ethan told me about his computer science classes, his new friends, his tentative steps into college life. I listened with the deep attention of someone who knows how precious ordinary moments can be when they follow extraordinary pain. Mom called, he said eventually, stirring his cocoa. From Chicago. She's found an apartment. Wants me to visit at Thanksgiving. Will you go? I asked carefully. He shrugged. Maybe. Dad says I should give her a chance. That she's really trying this time. Your father has become quite wise, I observed. Yeah. Ethan smiled faintly. He's different now. Better, I think. Is that weird to say? Not at all. Sometimes people need to break before they can rebuild stronger. Later, after Ethan had gone upstairs to the guest room that was becoming his weekend sanctuary, I sat on the porch swing watching stars emerge in the autumn sky. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Ethan, make it safely? Yes, I replied. We're having breakfast tomorrow if you want to join us. Richard might be here too. A pause then. Sounds good. I'd like that. I set the phone aside and wrapped my cardigan tighter against the evening chill. 1 year ago, I had placed $800,000 in a secret trust, never imagining how crucial that decision would prove. My retirement fund was gone now, my financial future more modest than planned, but I had salvaged something far more valuable: my autonomy, my family, my sense of self. As I rocked gently in the growing darkness, I thought about the women in my class, each protecting herself against an uncertain future. I thought about Ethan, building a life with stronger foundations than his father had. I thought about Richard, offering companionship for whatever years remained to us. The future would bring its own challenges. It always did. But whatever came, I would face it on my terms, in my house, surrounded by the people who had earned the right to remain in my life. Some lessons come at terrible cost, but once learned, they armor us against the world in ways money never could. I closed my eyes, feeling the solid porch beneath me, the house behind me, the sky above me, all mine, all safe. For now, for today, that was enough. Thank you so much for listening. Subscribe to the channel, like, share, and leave your story in the comments if you feel like it.
You know, before I end this video, I want to talk to you for a moment. Not as a narrator, not as someone telling a story, but just as someone sitting across from you, reflecting on what we just experienced together. Because stories like this, they don't just come and go, they stay. They linger in your mind, in your chest, in that quiet space where you start asking yourself questions you didn't expect. I remember the first time I came across a story like this. It wasn't dramatic in the way movies are. There were no grand speeches, no perfect endings, just the woman facing things that felt impossibly heavy. And yet, somehow she kept going. Not because she had all the answers, not because she wasn't afraid, but because something inside her refused to give up. And I think that's what makes stories like the one you just watched so powerful. It's not about perfection. It's not about always winning. It's about endurance. It's about what happens when the world tries to defy you, limit you, silence you, and you still choose to stand. Even if your voice shakes, even if your steps are slow. The women in these stories, they're not just characters. They represent something real, something that has existed for generations, strength that has been passed down, even though pain, courage that show up, even when it feels like there's nothing left. And if you really think about it, how many times has that kind of strength gone unnoticed? How many stories were never told? How many voices were never heard? That's why this channel exists. to create a space where those stories are not just told but felt, where every moment of struggle matters, where every act of courage, no matter how small, is seen, and where rising again and again becomes something worth honoring. Maybe there was a moment in this story that hit you a little differently. Maybe it reminded you of someone you know. Maybe it reminded you of yourself. And if it did, I hope you hold on to that. Because strength doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes it looks like surviving one more day. Sometimes it looks like walking away. Sometimes it looks like starting over when everything in you is tired. But it's still strength and it still matters. So as you leave this video, don't just move on to the next thing right away. Sit with this for a second. Think about the journeys you just witnessed. Think about what it represents. And most importantly, remember that every story like this is the reminder of something powerful. That no matter how many times someone is pushed down, no matter how many systems try to break them, there is always the possibility of rising again. If this story meant something to you, I'd love for you to stay with us on this journey, because there are so many more stories waiting. Stories that will challenge you, move you, and maybe even change the way you see the world just a little bit. Thank you for being here with me, truly. And until the next story, take care of yourself, keep your heart open, and never forget how powerful it is to rise, even when it's hard. Bye.